Consistency isn't just a habit. It's a neurobiological necessity if you want long-term results, whether you're trying to improve your health, build a business, master a skill, or rewire how you think. It's not the intensity of effort that drives success. It's the repetition, the regularity, the neuroplastic changes that only occur when behaviors are repeated over time. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt, is one of the most important discoveries in neuroscience. It's the foundation for learning, habit formation, skill development, and even recovery from trauma. But one critical truth often gets overlooked, e.g., neuroplasticity requires repetition of you. Not just effort, not just motivation, not even just intensity. Change in the brain happens through consistent, repeated action over time. At its core, the brain is an energy-efficient prediction machine. It likes patterns. It wants to create shortcuts. When you do something once, your brain registers it, but it doesn't necessarily change. When you do something 10 times, a weak neural connection might begin to form, but only when you do something hundreds or thousands of times, especially under similar conditions, does the brain start to remodel its structure around that action. That's when real neuroplastic change happens. This principle explains why change often feels slow and why it's so easy to fall back into old habits. If you've done something a certain way for years, your brain has built thick, traveled neural pathways to support that behavior. Trying to build a new behavior means constructing new pathways, literally creating a new route through the jungle of your mind. The only way to clear that new path is to walk it again and again every single day until it becomes the path of least resistance. Think about how you learned to tie your shoes or ride a bike. It wasn't a matter of understanding it conceptually. It was about doing it, messing up, correcting, doing again and again until your nervous system adapted. Eventually, brain offloaded that task to your subconscious because the neural circuit became so well worn that conscious effort was no longer needed. That's the end goal of repetitioning, to move something from effortful to automatic. But this process doesn't only apply to physical skills. It also governs emotional regulation, mental habits, and cognitive performance. If you want to respond to stress differently, become more focused, improve memory, or shift your internal dialogue, repetition is still the key. Saying one affirmation won't change your self-perception. Meditating once won't lower your baseline anxiety. But practicing those behaviors daily can begin to restructure the regions of the brain associated with attention, emotion, and identity. On a biological level, this transformation happens through the strengthening or weakening of synaptic connections. When a set of neurons fires together repeatedly, they become more likely to activate together in the future. This is known as Hebb's rule. Neurons that fire together wire together. The more often you repeat a behavior, the more efficient that neural circuit becomes and the less effort it takes to activate it. This is why consistent practice makes a task feel easier over time. It's not that your muscles are necessarily stronger, but that your nervous system has become more efficient. There's another dimension to these: timing and spacing. While cramming or intense effort in short bursts may feel productive, spaced repetition is more effective for lasting change. The brain consolidates learning during rest, especially during sleep. So repeating a behavior or practice regularly over days and weeks allows those changes to take hold. That's why doing a task for 20 minutes a day for 30 days is far more powerful than doing it for 10 hours in a single day. Consistency also creates predictability, in which helps the brain reduce uncertainty and conserve energy. When you do a behavior at the same time every day, like exercising in the morning, journaling at night, or doing focused work in a specific time block, your brain begins to anticipate it. This anticipation primes the necessary circuits in advance, making the behavior smoother and more automatic. Over time, this predictability becomes part of your identity, not just something you do, but who you are. Repetition also helps override resistance. At first, change feels hard because your brain resists novelty. It's metabolically expensive. But if you push through that initial resistance and repeat the behavior long enough, the effort decreases. The resistance isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a biological signal that you're entering a zone of potential rewiring. The only way out is through, and the only way through is repetition. So if you want to change your brain, your habits, your focus, your behavior, your emotional responses, don't chase intensity. Chase consistency. Don't worry about perfection. Worry about repetition. Neuroplasticity is always happening, but whether it's working for you or against you depends on what you choose to repeat. You're not just practicing a behavior, you're training your brain, and every repetition is a vote for the person you are becoming. Most people wait for motivation before taking action. They believe that to begin something difficult, whether it's starting a workout routine, writing a book, studying for an exam, or having a hard conversation, they need to feel a certain way first. They wait for a spark of energy, clarity, or drive before moving. But this mindset is backward. Motivation isn't what drives action. Action is what creates motivation. From a neuroscience perspective, motivation is not a prerequisite, it's a result. Your brain operates on feedback loops, action followed by internal reward, which then reinforces that action. When you initiate a task, even when you don't feel like it, the act of starting sets off a cascade of biological changes. You engage your attentional systems, you activate your motor circuits, and most importantly, you trigger the release of dopamine, a neuromodulator that plays a key role in motivation, reward, and goal-directed behavior. The key insight here is that dopamine doesn't only spike when you achieve something, it increases in response to pursuit. When you lean into a task, even if it's uncomfortable, and especially when it's voluntary, your brain rewards that initiation with a small burst of dopamine. That small chemical reward tells your nervous system, this is worth doing, and encourages continued effort. The more often you engage in this loop, take action, receive dopamine, repeat, the more reliable your motivation becomes over time. This principle is why starting is the hardest part. It's not because the task is objectively difficult. It's because the motivational system in the brain hasn't been activated yet. The moment you begin, you cross a kind of neurological threshold. Even 5 minutes of focused effort can shift your internal chemistry enough to carry you forward. This is often called the activation energy of behavior. Once you get past the initial resistance, momentum takes over. But if you sit and wait for the right mood or the perfect environment, the brain remains in a passive state. No action, no reward, no reinforcement. And the longer you wait, the more resistance builds. That's how procrastination becomes self-reinforcing. It's not laziness, it's a lack of action-driven dopamine reinforcement. The way out of that loop is not to think your way out, it's to move. Even small actions can create a powerful shift. Lacing up your shoes signals the start of a workout. Opening your notebook signals the start of writing. Sitting down with a book and removing distractions signals the start of deep learning. These behaviors tell your brain, this matters. And as soon as your brain registers that signal, it begins adapting to support the behavior. It redirects attention, primes motor systems, and releases the chemistry needed to sustain effort. But none of this happens unless you start. This mechanism is not only useful for productivity, it's crucial for building discipline and mental resilience. When you repeatedly take action regardless of how you feel, you train your brain to decouple emotion from execution. This is a critical shift. Most people think they need to feel good in order to do good work. But peak performers, especially in high-stress fields like athletics, military, science, or entrepreneurship, understand the opposite. Consistency is built on taking action in the absence of motivation. That's how real endurance is formed, by doing it anyway. The more often you take action without waiting to feel ready, the more responsive your brain becomes. Over time, the threshold for action lowers. You need less internal negotiation. You waste less energy resisting the task. That's because the behavior itself has become a trigger for dopamine. Not the result, not the outcome, the behavior. That is the essence of behavioral momentum. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. It suggests that our brains hold on to incomplete tasks with greater tension than completed ones. Starting a task creates cognitive tension, and finishing it releases that tension. But the magic begins with initiation. Once you start, you create a psychological drive to follow through. That drive is motivational, and it gets stronger with repetition. In short, if you want to feel motivated, start doing the thing you're avoiding. If you want to become consistent, build the habit of initiating, especially when it's inconvenient. The feeling will follow the action, not the other way around. Motivation is not something to be waited for. It's something to be generated through movement, engagement, and deliberate effort. Don't overthink it. Don't overplan it. Just start. Take one step, even a small one. Let your brain do the rest. Most people approach consistency with the wrong toolset. They rely on emotion, on inspiration, on fleeting bursts of motivation to keep them on track. But the truth is, consistency doesn't come from how you feel. It comes from what you've built. It's not about being constantly fired up or deeply passionate every single day. It's about having a structure in place that makes following through the default, not the exception. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. Emotion is unpredictable, and it fluctuates based on sleep, nutrition, stress, hormones, and countless other factors. If your ability to stay consistent is tied to emotion, then your behavior will be as unstable as your mood. But structure provides stability. It gives your nervous system something to anchor to, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Structure means systems. It means schedules. It means clear protocols that you follow whether or not you feel like it. If you wake up at the same time, train at the same time, and work in focused blocks according to a plan, your brain starts to expect that pattern. That expectation triggers automatic behaviors because the brain thrives on predictability. When something happens at the same time, in the same context, over and over again, the brain begins to automate it. That's how habits are formed. That's how consistency becomes second nature. This is why willpower fails. Willpower is a limited resource. It's affected by how much decision making you've done, how tired you are, even how much glucose is in your bloodstream. If your routine depends on willpower, you're setting yourself up for inconsistency. But if you use structure, clear triggers, routines, and boundaries, you reduce the number of decisions you need to make. You eliminate choice. You just act. Think about how this works in elite performance settings. Athletes don't train when they feel like it. Soldiers don't follow orders when they're the mood. Scientists don't run experiments only when they're inspired. They have systems, they follow protocols. And over time, those systems free up mental space for higher level thinking and deeper focus. That's the paradox of discipline through structure. It doesn't restrict you, it frees you. One of the most effective ways to build structure is to implement time-based cues. Start with when you wake up. Set your alarm for the same time every day, weekends included. Get out of bed, hydrate, and expose yourself to natural light within the first hour. This isn't just good practice, it's biological alignment. Light exposure anchors your circadian rhythm, and consistency in that rhythm improves energy, focus, and mood throughout the day. That single action begins a cascade of predictable biological processes that support sustained performance. Another key structural element is task batching. Group similar tasks together and schedule them in recurring time blocks. Do your most demanding cognitive work when your brain is primed for it, usually earlier in the day. Avoid multitasking. Create designated windows for email, meetings, creative work, and recovery. This not only reduces decision fatigue, but also trains your nervous system to anticipate what's coming. Over time, those patterns reduce internal friction. Environment is structure too. Your physical space can reinforce or sabotage your habits. If your phone is always within reach, distraction becomes your default. If your workspace is cluttered, your brain spends more effort filtering out noise. But if you keep your environment clean, organized, and purpose-driven, it sends a signal to your brain. This is where work happens. That signal, repeated often enough, creates behavioral momentum. Emotion still plays a role, but it's secondary. The emotional highs you get from progress or accomplishment are powerful, but they're the byproduct, not the foundation. If you wait for those highs before you act, you'll rarely act. But if you build a system, you'll create more of those moments naturally. Emotion should be the result of consistency, not the fuel for it. In the end, consistency isn't about how much you want it in any given moment. It's about what you've made non-negotiable. You don't rise to the level of your feelings, you fall to the level of your structure. So build well. Eliminate friction. Set clear expectations with yourself. Create a routine that doesn't depend on your mood, and your behavior will follow. That's how you train your brain for consistency, not through constant inspiration, but through the quiet power of structure. Resistance is one of the most misunderstood signals in personal growth. Most people take it as a red flag, an indicator to stop, to back off, to reassess. But in reality, resistance is often a green light. It's a biological marker that change is happening. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your nervous system is being challenged in a way that requires adaptation. From a neurological standpoint, resistance is the friction your brain feels when it's forced out of autopilot. Your brain is incredibly efficient at doing what it's already wired to do. It prefers routine, energy conservation, and predictability. So when you introduce a new behavior, whether it's waking up earlier, engaging in focused work, exercising, or confronting a fear, your brain pushes back, not because you're incapable, but because it's trying to protect its current wiring. This friction is real. You feel it as mental fatigue, procrastination, self-doubt, how to eat, or even physical discomfort. But it's important to understand that this discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're pressing against the edge of your current capacity, and that's where growth lies. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, doesn't kick in when everything is easy. It activates when your existing circuits are no longer sufficient for the task at hand. So that's what the resistance is. It's your old wiring struggling to keep up with a new demand. Every time you encounter resistance and push through it, you're forcing your brain and body to adapt. You're telling your nervous system, this is the new standard. And with enough repetition, your system begins to recalibrate. What was once difficult becomes familiar. What was once mentally draining becomes automatic. But that transition doesn't happen without friction. This process is no different than lifting weights. The first time you load the barbell with a weight you've never lifted, your muscles shake. Your form is unstable. Your nervous system is working overtime to coordinate your effort. That resistance is your body learning. Push through it enough times with proper form, and your muscles adapt. The nervous system refines the movement. The effort decreases. What once felt impossible becomes your new baseline. The exact same principle applies to every kind of behavioral change. From improving focus to managing stress to learning a new skill. The real danger isn't resistance, it's avoidance. When you avoid resistance, you stay inside the safety of your current abilities. You don't challenge your brain to adapt, so your capabilities remain static. Worse, your tolerance for discomfort shrinks, which means even minor challenges begin to feel overwhelming. Over time, avoidance reinforces weakness. It signals to your brain that difficulty is a threat. This is how stagnation happens, not through failure, but through retreat. But when you consistently face resistance and choose to move forward, something else happens. Your brain begins to associate challenge with growth. You build a tolerance for discomfort. That's not just mental toughness. It's a rewiring of your stress response system. You're training yourself to recognize that resistance doesn't mean stop, lean in. And that shift in interpretation can change your entire trajectory. This is why resistance often shows up right before a breakthrough, whether you're on the verge of mastering a new skill, hitting a new level of discipline, or overcoming a limiting belief. There's usually a spike in internal pushback. That spike is your old circuitry fighting for survival. Your brain is trying to pull you back into what's familiar. But if you hold the line and push forward, you tip the scale. You overwrite pattern and install a new one. It's critical to learn how to distinguish resistance from dysfunction. Pain that signals injury or chronic burnout isn't the kind of resist you push through, you recover from it, but the kind of resistance that comes from effort, repetition, uncertainty, or fear of failure. That's the signal you lean into. That's where real adaptation happens. In practical terms, this means reframing how you approach difficulty. Instead of asking, why is this so hard? Ask, what am I building right now? Understand that the moments when you feel the most friction are the moments when your system is most primed for growth. Those moments are neurobiologically significant. They're windows of opportunity. Don't waste them. Resistance is not your enemy. It's a signal that your brain is engaged, your body is alert, and your potential is being tested. The only way to build a new capacity is to stress the current one. So when resistance shows up, meet it head on. That's the price of adaptation, and that's the process of transformation. Most people overestimate the power of willpower and underestimate the value of protocols. They believe success, discipline, and consistency come from internal strength, the ability to push through, to resist temptation, to grind harder than others. But willpower is unreliable. It fluctuates daily, sometimes hourly, based on sleep, stress, blood sugar levels, environment, and countless other variables. If you're relying on willpower to guide your behavior, you've already built a fragile system. Protocols are different. Protocols are structured, repeatable actions that don't depend on how you feel. They're decisions made in advance that simplify your path forward. When you operate from protocol instead of motion, you eliminate friction. You don't ask yourself, should I work out today? You follow the plan. You don't debate whether to start your writing session. You begin when the protocol tells you to. This isn't robotic. It's liberating, because once the decision has been made by the protocol, your energy can go toward execution, not negotiation. The nervous system thrives on predictability. When your behaviors occur at the same time, under the same conditions, your brain starts to build associations. These become behavioral triggers. Over time, the trigger itself begins to generate readiness. If you always begin your focused work at 8 a.m., in a quiet room with a specific playlist and a glass of water, your brain starts preparing for that deep work even before you sit down. The context becomes the chew. That's protocol in action. Protocols also reduce cognitive load. The brain can only handle so many conscious decisions each day before decision fatigue sets in. Every should I or when should I burns valuable energy and willpower. But when you build your day around fixed structures, you remove unnecessary decisions. You protect mental bandwidth. This is why some of the highest performing individuals in the world have seemingly rigid routines. It's not about control. It's about preserving energy for what truly matters. Willpower, on the other hand, is like a battery. It drains. It fails under pressure. You might resist the cookie today, but if you're tired, anxious, or distracted tomorrow, that same decision becomes exponentially harder. Protocols make that decision once and for all. Instead of asking, do I eat the cookie? The protocol already outlines your nutritional plan. Your job is to follow it, not feel your way through it. One of the best examples of protocol-driven behavior is in professional sports. Athletes don't warm up, train, hydrate, and recover based on how motivated they feel. They follow detailed protocols created by coaches, trainers, and physiologists. These protocols are optimized for performance, recovery, and longevity. When athletes are injured, their recovery isn't left to hope. It's governed by rehabilitation protocols with specific timelines and measurable progress points. The same logic applies to mental performance, creativity, and personal development. Even in high-stakes professions like aviation, medicine, and special operations, protocols are the backbone. Pilots don't rely on gut instinct when a warning light flashes. They follow a checklist. Surgeons don't wing it in the OR. They follow a sequence refined through decades of data. These systems exist because even the most experienced professionals can't rely on willpower or instincts when the stakes are high. Protocols keep the system stable. In everyday life, adopting this mindset means designing protocols for your most important behaviors. A morning protocol might include light exposure, hydration, movement, and focus goal review, all done before checking your phone or engaging in reactive tasks. A work protocol might dictate that your deep focus block happens from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. with no notifications and no email. A sleep protocol might include screen cutoff time, low lighting, and breath work before bed. The point isn't to be rigid. It's to be intentional. Protocols can evolve. They're not fixed forever. You refine them as your goals shift, as your understanding deepens, as your feedback grows. But the key is to operate from a place of design, not impulse, because when you rely on willpower, your default state becomes inconsistency. But when you rely on protocol, your default becomes discipline. The irony is that the more you use protocols, the more willpower you build, but not exercising it directly, but by creating wins, reinforcing confidence, and reducing chaos. Every time you follow your protocol, you strengthen the neural circuits of identity, the part of your brain that says, this is who I am. Over time, that becomes your new baseline. You don't need more motivation. You need better systems. You don't need stronger will. You need clearer protocols. Decide once, act repeatedly. That's the formula. Because in the long run, protocols beat willpower every time. Discipline is often seen as something you either have or you don't, an internal trait, a matter of will, maybe even a gift. But in reality, discipline is not a personality trait. It's not hardwired or predetermined. It's something that is constructed, and it's constructed through repetition. When an action is repeated enough times, it stops being a decision and starts becoming part of your identity. This is the process through which discipline evolves into identity. At the beginning of any behavioral change, discipline feels mechanical. You're fighting inertia. The nervous system resists deviation from familiar patterns because change requires energy. Starting something new, whether it's a training protocol, a daily writing habit, or a nutrition plan, initially demands deliberate effort. But here's what matters. Every repetition sends a signal to your brain. That signal says, this is what we do now. It's a small vote toward a new version of you. Neuroscience has shown that repeated behaviors strengthen neural circuits through a process called long-term potentiation. Simply put, the more often a particular neural pathway is activated, the stronger and more automatic it becomes. This is the biological foundation for habit formation, but it goes deeper. Repetition not only forms habits, it begins to shape self-concept. The story you tell yourself about who you are starts to shift, not because of how you feel, but because of what you consistently do. This is why discipline must be behavior first. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person before acting disciplined. You act disciplined first, even when it feels unnatural, and over time, your internal dialogue starts to reflect your external behavior. Identity follows action, not the other way around. The power in this approach is that it removes the need for constant self-negotiation. In the early stages, you might say, I need to go to the gym. Later, it becomes, I go to the gym. And eventually, it becomes, I'm the kind of person who trains daily. That last statement is identity. And when a behavior becomes part of your identity, it no longer requires the same level of conscious effort. It becomes a default. This shift isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. A single workout doesn't make you an athlete. One day of clean eating doesn't make you disciplined. But when those behaviors become patterns repeated over weeks and months, the nervous system integrates them as baseline operations. They move from the domain of conscious decision-making into automated self-expression. The key here is frequency. High frequency Low friction repetition builds identity faster than sporadic high intensity effort. If you meditate once for an hour, you feel calm for a day. If you meditate for 5 minutes every morning, you become someone who meditates. The same applies to reading, writing, training, studying, and every other meaningful pursuit. Repetition is not just practice, it's self-definition. Another critical component is behavioral congruence. When your actions align with the identity you're trying to build, your internal system starts reinforcing that identity. Every time you follow through on a behavior aligned with discipline, you earn internal credibility. You trust yourself more. You begin to see yourself as capable, consistent, and resilient. And that perception drives future behavior. You act disciplined because you are disciplined, and you are disciplined because you act that way consistently. Over time, this loop becomes self-reinforcing. Discipline stops being a burden and becomes a source of pride, not because you're grinding harder than everyone else, but because your behaviors and your identity are in sync. That alignment creates internal coherence, a state where your thoughts, actions, and values are integrated. This coherence reduces mental friction and builds momentum. It's easier to keep going when who you are and what you do match. There will still be off days, of course, but once discipline becomes identity, missing a behavior feels like a disruption, not a relief. You don't skip the workout because you're lazy. You skip and feel off balance because it's inconsistent with who you are. That's how you know the transformation has occurred. So if you're trying to build discipline, don't wait for some grand internal shift. Start with action. Repeat it even if it feels mechanical. Let repetition carve a new groove in your brain and a new image in your mind. You don't need to fake discipline. You need to earn it through behavior. Eventually, the gap between what you do and who you are disappears. That's when discipline stops being a task and becomes your identity.